Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of Adornment and Theory at Home. This is our IG series in which I interview our artists and gem dealers so you get a sense of all the really amazing people that make our studio so kick-ass. So today, usually we've been in my living room. Welcome to my bedroom. This is actually my headboard. My husband's on a Zoom call. I'm on a Zoom call. You guys know how it is. You kind of have to make it work. This is our new normal. Today, I'm very excited. Our next guest is joining us all the way from Greece. He's actually in Crete. Yianni Melas, also known as the Gem Explorer on Instagram. If you're not following him, you absolutely totally should. The best way I can describe Yianni is like the Indiana Jones of gem hunting. His primary job for years has been to discover and purchase rough, and he works with major companies such as Swarovski, as well as David Yurman. He is most notable for discovering aqua praise, which is a really beautiful stone. And another aspect of his work that's very major is his activism. His advocacy for children and mining communities is huge. If you follow him on Instagram, whether it's in his stories or his tiles, he is constantly exposing responsible practices, but more so also irresponsible practices and things that need to be checked with some real accountability. So that's something that's near and dear to my heart. That's a value that both him and I share. And I am very excited for you guys to meet him. So welcome, Yianni. All right, so my first question. So you describe yourself, well, your Instagram handle is Gem Explorer. In a world that feels very explored already and exhausted, do you feel like mining still has a place? Do you still believe that there is more to be explored and more that should be mined?
I think that's a really good question because I think the way that people perceive the world of mining is when they see these videos where people from all these institutions are trying to collect money for donations and everything else, but what they don't realize is that gemstones actually destroys a very small part of the world when it comes down to mining compared to all the things that they're using to promote those practices. For example, steel, cobalt, all these different copper. These minerals take vast areas where they destroy the topsoil and everything else, and if you look at gemstones, that's exactly what they are. They're very rare, and so if they were so easily found everywhere, they wouldn't be so rare and so expensive. So, in my opinion, if you go to different parts of the world, I mean, there is a saying that I came up with a long time ago. You look at the most desolate places of the world where people are not doing very well and they're disadvantaged. And you will see where God sprinkled gemstones there so that people could actually make something of their lives from it.
Yeah.
So my answer is that I'm a bit sick of all the people out there trying to destroy what gemstones actually do for people. Gemstones bring in a lot of money to people that are willing to work. In other words, unlike all these institutions, UNICEF and everything else, where people just sit there and wait for handouts.
Yeah.
When you come to the places where I go to, you see you're in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of where there is hardly any food. Gemstones are not always, if you look at things geologically, a lot of the gemstones are found in places like Australia, out in the deserts and different areas which are very desolate, where you can't even do mining. Where you can't even do farming. So mining is actually the only way that people can make a living out of it. So, gemstones provide an income for people willing to break their backs, dig, and do things in order to feed their family. It doesn't mean that every mine is like that, but I can tell you there are a lot of mines where people just like to dig, like we like to go to Montana, like we like to go to Arkansas, all of us are all rockhounds. Now, it's interesting, you look at the states with all the rockhounds, digging up everywhere. Nobody looks at those individuals as doing something bad or people are benefiting from them digging up turquoise or whatever, you know.
Well, I think
So
it's a little different because, you know, there's the aspect of exploitation, right? So that's, you know, and because people are so far removed from the supply chain, that's where the question really comes in, right? And
that is not true.
yeah.
That is not true. Exploitation happens only in the first, let's say, 3 months to 6 months. So the minute that you have a mine working for 6 months, today with the technology of Instagram, where everybody's posting their photographs from the mine with the most simple phones, the next thing you know, you got 100 Sri Lankans, you know, 200 Thais, 300 West Africans, you know, and 200 Indians at the same location, setting up their little buying offices for those people. So, you know, we need to be the exact opposite, because everybody's trying to make jewelers out of the guys who are digging the gemstones. It's like going to the farmers of America and trying to make, you know, croissant makers out of the farmers. The farmer is a farmer, and a croissant maker is a croissant maker. And if the croissant guy is making $3 for his croissant, it doesn't mean that the flour in the croissant is $3.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think what you're talking about is us putting, you know, first world Western ideals on top of other countries, and then, which is the whole.
I think, Viviana, I think that what we need to do as designers is actually promote more buying trips to those artisanal miners, because the more people we have visiting those locations, the more we're actually adding income, not just in the gemstones, but in the hotels and the taxis and to the food going there. Everybody makes an income from that. And so we need to start looking at these natural resources as not exploiting, but actually giving back to the society, because actually it does amazing good. And I've said this story before. This is not fair what we're doing to Africans in terms of creating this drama story sometimes. Yes, there's a lot of bad things that are happening, but we need to support the artisanal miners versus the large-scale miners, because if you look at Burma, yes, there are large-scale miners, but there's also small-scale miners, and they coexist together with each other.
Yeah.
The minute that you have an area which is completely controlled by large-scale miners, and the small-scale miners are basically kicked out and called thieves and everything else, you are now creating something which is actually not very ethical. So we need to take the wealth of the land and spread it among the people versus corporations. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. If you look at Mogok, which has been around for hundreds of years, and it is the historical source of rubies in the world. If you go there and if you see how the system is set up there, women control the gemstone business there. They are the leaders of, they have their own little businesses. And you come to Mogok and you will see a couple thousand women with their own little spaces selling their little gemstones that they've managed to collect. It's like their little businesses. And what's wrong with that? You know, they have access to cutting gemstones in Thailand. They have access to making jewelry in Yangon. There's several factories there, but they just prefer to roll their money and buy and sell. And let me tell you something, you know, go to Mogok and try to make money from those women. They are sharp. They know more about that rough than you do.
Super tough business women. It's awesome.
They are little sharks. Let me tell you, they will play the innocent one. They will almost cry on you, and you're like thinking that you're going to feed them, and you know they walk away with a couple thousand, and you go back to try and cut those gemstones, and you end up losing. So old days, the truth is, in the old days, we used to take advantage because we didn't have communication. Today, there's a gemstone discovered in Nigeria. The next thing you know, there's 100 guys trying to sell it on Instagram, you know, and they're tagging it. So you immediately know where those gemstones are, you know, so everyone's flying there. Everyone's going there. So it's a very small world today. I find it very difficult as an explorer to actually buy today because of these, you know, this openness. It's almost like everyone is connected to everybody nowadays. So the way I see it, I think that the people need to recognize that people growing synthetics, like in the diamond business,
Yeah.
you know, who are we funding? You know, if you're buying a $2,000 diamond, who is getting that money? All right, who is getting it? It's the guy who is financing the machine, and the guy who's selling the diamond. All right, that's it. Where if you're talking about a diamond, whether it's as they say, you know, a few dollars a day or whatever, you know, let me tell you something. It's not the way it is. I mean, nobody will buy a diamond in Africa in the middle of the river and then they'll sell it for like $10. It doesn't work that way. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
The Africans
They
are
know
not
the
that
value.
stupid.
They know the value of their product.
They know. I mean,
They
they
know.
will jump into rap
The
reports.
perception is like, oh, they're being taken. Yes, no, they absolutely know the value of their product.
It is not like that. And this thing about blood diamonds, that's ridiculous. I mean, I have traveled the world in Vietnam. I mean, where right after Vietnam opened up, the most horrible conditions. Yes, I've been chased by lions and I've been threatened a few times and everything else, but you know, it's not the way it is. I mean, the people that we have to worry about the most is not the guys with the machetes, but it's the corporations that are trying to paint a very negative picture of the artisanal miners. Okay, so these are corporations that are based in London that are trying to say that people in Africa are thieves, and it doesn't work that way. You know, wait a minute. The guy who's in Mozambique and the guy who's coming in from Tanzania, I mean, he's more African than any British company will ever be. So, you know, today it's like saying somebody from Florida is going to go to Alabama, and he shouldn't go to Alabama to get something, pick peaches or whatever, because he's from Florida. You know, they are all one people. And if you look at the West Africans that are supporting, let's say, the buying of the gemstones there, you know, the people there, they have no money. Okay, so, you know, let me tell you how it is right now. If it's a large corporation, they can only hire a few people to dig. So they're not going to hire the thousands. Well, the West Africans will hire, you know, all these individuals that don't have any food to eat. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you what they are so hungry that they will trade a bag of rice that they will get from the West Africans for a bag of, let's say, dirt that potentially has rubies inside. Mm-hmm. But these Africans that are creating this environment over there are actually feeding the people. And how many times they buy equipment from these guys, and they do so much, and at the end of the day, these guys run off with their equipment, and all their investment is lost. So I have to say, I'm very, very proud of the West African community. They're Africans benefiting and taking advantage of the natural resources of their country versus you know, Westerners. And I'm all out to support them in doing so. And I do 100% believe that large-scale mining companies are very important in mining.
So how much of your work overlaps with humanitarian or advocacy work? Is that just something that has kind of sprung up over time, or discussion? Would you even consider that a part of your work as a whole?
I have finished my art collection quite a few years back ago, but I felt that if I'm going to get into my design work, then it's going to appear not so easy to do the activism, because, you know, you're not really believed. You know, you're selling with one hand, you know, you're selling jewelry and gemstones. On the other hand, you're, you know, you're trying to promote causes and help people. And although a lot of people do that, and I really applaud them, because I mean, obviously they're doing something versus doing nothing. I felt, you know, this goes back to my religion. Actually, it's a very interesting thing. But in the Orthodox religion, the priest cannot. Once he decides to go into the church and he wants to become like in the leadership, he has to decide whether he's going to become a priest and have his own church, or go into the leadership. If he goes into the leadership, he cannot marry. all right?
Yeah.
Because the leadership requires so much of your input that you cannot have a family to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So the Orthodox Church, and this is an analogy which I'm making for you, the Orthodox Church has said, you know what, if you want to have a family, you can have it, but you can only become a priest. You can't go into the leadership, all right? Because it's a conflict of interest. And here's the beautiful part, and I'm not mixing religion, but I'm using religion as a way that we learn things from it.
Yeah.
So the priest cannot become a priest until he marries, because once he becomes a priest, he has all this power, you know, among the women in the crowd, that he can take advantage of. So in jewelry and gemstones, you know, I had to make the decision, at least for this part of my life, of being in the leadership and not being married to the gemstones and the jewelry world as much as I could be. Because if I was, everything wouldn't appear as if I'm doing it just for the purpose of what I'm doing it. So I'm about to retire from that, in my opinion, because activism actually takes a big toll on you. And few people know that this began back in my 20s. And so I have done activism in Burma under the radar against the junta. I have done activism in Botswana, where I helped build the GIA school, because I realized that after almost 40 years, there was no GIA school there, and now there is a GIA school there. So I was part of the lobbying that took place for that. I helped in Zimbabwe in every way that I could, and I'm obviously, you saw in Angola with children's, you know, the children having the highest death toll in the world, and now I'm doing Mozambique. But the thing is that it's taken a huge part of my life, and I've done a small amount of work in order to survive, right? But I haven't immersed myself into what I love the most, which is actually jewelry design. And and I realized that once I decide to do that, which is going to be this year, that I will not be able to be the activist that I was for so many years. But you know what? It's the guys like, you know, that did, you know, 10 tours to Vietnam. You know, you come back, you're done. You know, you just want to sit by the barbecue, cook your, you know, whatever. And it doesn't mean that I'll retire, but it means that I will not be immersed in it completely.
So 2 questions we're going to do. They're a little bit different, but what is the most underrated gemstone that you love?
You know, one of my favorite gemstones of all time has been a stone that a lot of people know about, but I believe few have even thought about marketing because it's just not around. And it was introduced to me by the gentleman that did the original mining, Rex Harris, which was the red beryl. You know, I absolutely love the red beryl, and I believe that if a serious company was to go there and mine it, it would have an immense potential. Another gemstone that I absolutely love is benitoite. I think it's a magnificent gemstone, both American gems. And I think there's a lot of gems out there that don't have good names. And one of them is zircon, for example. I think zircon, they've tried to come up with all these other names, but I don't think we've come up with a good marketing name for zircon yet. I think zircon's got a lot going for it. Spinel has been always one of my favorites, but it's no longer underrated. It is already on its way up. But Spinel was Edward Bohm, who's the grandson of Dr. Gublin. We did one of the original poster sessions back in the late 80s at GIA on Spinel. And back then, everybody associated Spinel with something synthetic because of the massive amount of Spinels that were released in America, during the 50s and 60s. But the Spinel now has overcome that. And it's gaining its own popularity. But I think there's a lot of gemstones, and to give you a really full description of what I like gemstones not just because it's a ruby or a sapphire, but because it comes from an unusual location.
Yeah.
For example, there are sapphires that come from, a mine near Paris. There are emeralds that come from Austria. I like gemstones which have a story, and they're rare.
Yeah.
If you want to have a Zambian emerald, you can get a ton of them, but try to get an Austrian emerald. There's not that, Habaktal, there's a beautiful area there that produces very small little emeralds. But, I love these unusual gems that have stories to say.
That's very cool. If you were to get one message out to an average consumer, what would it be?
Well, there's 1,000 stories out there.
Exactly. I know. If there was just for some people that message is, know where your source is from. For, other people have answered this a whole litany of ways, but.
I think for me, it all comes back to gems doing good for people. And I'm a very firm believer that that natural gems give back a lot to the places where they come from. And I think we need to stop focusing on how much the miner is getting, and focus more on making sure that people are exposed to the miner, because that's where natural competition takes place. Mm-hmm. So if we have more trips that are organized to go to Mogok, for example, for buying trips, like a lot of the associations in Thailand do, they create these almost tourist trips that people go to Mogok, and they're exposed to the people selling gemstones there. I think these are the greatest ways to bring fairness to those areas. But honestly, it's not fair to the wholesalers as well, because when they go out to the mines, people don't hear the stories about how much money people have lost going to the mines and buying things.
Yeah.
And then when they try to sell it, I've had so many friends that have this idea that they're going to go to Madagascar, they're going to buy it, they're going to cut it, they're going to bring it back, and they're going to sell it and make a fortune. And you have no idea how many friends that I've actually sent to different locations because it's their dream to go to the mine, and they go there. Mm-hmm. And they buy, and they have this feeling that they've really made a killing, and then they come back and they realize they can sell 1, 2 gemstones, but they can't sell the rest, and they're stuck with all this investment that they made into their purchase.
Yeah.
So what people don't understand is that people that are involved in cutting, yes, they go to the mines and they buy, but they buy big parcels, and then they're stuck with it. People don't realize the amount of interest that is lost in parcels that have been purchased, and they sit in the basement, and a few stones from them are sold, and then the other ones are just sitting. Or what happens to the bead quality, the cabochon quality? The cutting houses today barely scrape a living. Some of them making 15 to 20% profit. And I know so because I'm in contact with most of them, and so they win here, they lose there. They win here, they lose there. So
could you describe what you do now?
I think now, in terms of the direction that I'm going, is I have used these years that I've had in front of me to be able to absorb all the artistry and the culture that was possible. I mean, I have lived the ultimate dream of a person on a backpack, working for companies, buying for them or whatever. But it was a kind of trade. Let me photograph. Let me traveled these places, and these large companies, would fund my trips to go to these places. And if you look at Swarovski, Helmut Swarovski was such a kind gentleman. He would fund all my photography because he just couldn't wait to see the videos and the photographs when I came back. I was his eyes in the bush. So I used these over 30-year period of time that I've traveled all over the world as a trip of inspiration. What I have done in the last 30 years is I have collected thousands upon thousands of inspirational photographs, which I will now use for the future. So cataloging it into my computer, where if I want to draw a turtle, I have not just only turtles photographs, but I have things from antique shops that were in Thailand, turtles that were in Burma, turtles that were in India, turtles that were in Africa. So I can actually create, a turtle if I want to create, having all these inspirations. So I'm taking now my entire life and I'm cataloging it, and I'm now transitioning into what I really wanted to do, which is to design. So now I'm at the best part of my life, meaning I have all this gathering. And you could say I have all this fruit, and now it's time to make marmalade.
I love that. No, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
What I want to tell you is I thank you. You've been an amazing host, and I hope we can do that more often. And just remember, you can ask any question, politically correct or not politically correct. When I'm on air or whatever, I'm not afraid to answer, and I'm more than happy to support you, because everything that I say has a good intention behind it. And so I don't have to think about anything, because I know that whatever I say, there's nothing clever or there's nothing behind it, right? So if you speak from your gut, from your heart, and then you have nothing to fear. And I appreciate this opportunity that you gave me for this little sharing of knowledge, and I'm very honored and humbled that you have done so. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, you have a good night, and
thank you.
Eat some more leftovers from Easter.
Lots of lamb.
I know.
As we say in Greece, Kalinikta. Good night. Good night from Cyprus.